Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up a folder on my desktop called Images, where I have the 4 images which I'm going to use for this photographic montage. Now I need to start with a main image, so I'm actually going to make this image slightly bigger to start with. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double click the layer, the background layer, to unlock it, and I'll actually just rename this Portrait. And it's a good habit to actually rename your layers, especially when you have quite a few. I'm going to go over to the crop tool. I'm going to select the entire image here, but then I'm actually going to move the crop area out a little bit more and then press enter, and that's going to give me some extra canvas space. The crop tutorial that I've done previously goes into this in more detail. Okay, so I've got this space here, but I need to fill it with more of this stuff here. Now there's lots of different ways you can do this. I'm going to do a really quick and grungy way of doing it, which is just using the select tool, and that can be found over here. To just select this edge, and then using the edit free transform or the shortcut Command T, I'm going to just take this section and I'm going to stretch it out. Now when I'm happy with the selection, press enter to confirm, and then you'll notice we've still got this selection here, these little marching ants running all the way around this selection. We need to get rid of those before we do anything else, so we can go to select and deselect, or use a shortcut Command D. Now you'll notice that the pixels and the image here, it started to get a little bit fuzzy because we've pulled it out and we've stretched all the pixels. I'm not bothered about that because I know I'm going to be adding things over the top, and you're really not going to see this kind of deterioration in the image. It's not going to be a problem at all. So that's my first step. I've got the size I want. I wanted to do something a little bit more landscape, quite widescreen, so that's what I'm going for. Next step, I'm going to open up my other 3 images. So what I'm going to do, press the click on one, and I'm going to press the Command key to select the others if you're on a Mac, or you can just press the Alt key if you're on a PC, and I'm going to drag them onto the Photoshop window, and it's going to directly drop them into my project. So I can move this around. I'm just going to resize this because I get the option to do that now. Enter, and then it brings up the other one. I'll just enter that, and it brings up the last one. I'll just enter that, and you'll notice that we have those 3 layers automatically added to our layer stack, and the layer name corresponds to the image name. So I already renamed these images, tree, beach post, etc. That saves me a little bit of a step. You might also notice that next to each of these layers in CS5 there's this little additional icon here. This means it's a smart object. It's not important, it's not something that we need to look at now. So what we want to do is we want to make these into normal layers just by clicking the top, holding down the shift key, clicking the bottom. I'm just going to right click and go to rasterize layers. Again, what rasterized layers means, it's not important for this tutorial. We will cover things like that later on. So there we've got all 4 layers. So I'm just going to turn off all 3 layers here and just leave my portrait layer. And then I'm going to turn on my beach post layers. Now I've selected this as my next image because I actually want these posts to be taking up most of the empty space here. And if I just want to visualize how it's going to look, I can reduce the opacity of the layer just to see how I want it. And I'm going to actually use a blending mode. So here we have beach posts. At the moment the layer blending mode is normal. If I change this to something like multiply, look what happens. It actually reacts differently to the layer underneath. And you can go through these until you find something that works well, something that you're happy with. I'm just going to go down here, just have a look at these different ones. Exclusion. And you just flick through these until you find something that you think works well. Now I want something where I can see the portrait and I can also see the post, and hopefully maybe even see some of the background as well. So let's go to hard light, and now I can maybe reduce the opacity of my hard light layer. See, round about there. I quite like that effect about there. And I'm focusing really on this section here, not on the face, because I'm going to be getting rid of all this area because I want the face to come back through. I don't want anything really cutting across the eyes, because the eyes are the main focal point of this picture. So I've got my beach post layer set to hard light at 46%. And now I need to just get rid of this area. So I'm going to apply a layer mask on that area, on that layer. And then remember, I have to use a brush in order to add or remove the mask. And we've got a white mask, so I'm going to be using a black brush. I'm going to set the brush to 100% opacity to start with. And I'm just going to very quickly get rid of all the area from the beach post layer that I don't want on the portrait. Now I'm using a very soft brush at 0% hardness. This is going to allow me to create a nicer blend, a better transition between the images. So I'm just going to bring this, and I'm actually going to leave some of this texture. If we just zoom in here, you can see some of the texture coming onto the shoulder. I'm going to leave that because I quite like it. It kind of blends the image a bit better. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to try and sort this area out a bit. If I swap round the colours, black to white, I can bring the posts back. Let's swap this, make the brush a little bit smaller. Just want to bring that bit forward, almost as though the posts are going behind our subject. There, and I'm just doing little clicks until I'm happy with what I get. Okay, that works quite nice. So we've got two images now, one on top of the other. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in my third image. I'm going to bring in this letter, which I've just scanned in, and you know, adding text and adding words to your images, even though the wording might be total garbage, it might not mean anything, it might have nothing linked to the image. It just adds something to your picture. It gives it a little bit more meaning, almost like a diary entry or some secret message or something really important. And I'm going to decide where to put this. I think for the original image I had it in the corner here, and I'm going to do that again. I'm just going to make it bigger though. I'm going to press Command and T, and I hold down the Shift key to make sure I can increase the size of this in proportion. And I'm also just going to tilt it a little bit, and I'm going to have it there. Now at the moment we've got black writing on white paper on a white background. What I want to do is I want to invert that. So if I press Command and I, it will swap the black with the white and the white with the black. So now I've got the white writing on the black background. And I'm going to do exactly what I did with the beach post layer. I'm going to try out some of these different blending modes to find something that I like. Screen is quite nice. Lighten is fairly good as well. I think I'm liking lighten at the moment. Let's try hard light, soft light. No, I'm going to go with lighten or screen. Yeah, I'm going to stick with lighten, and it's got rid of all the black, which is great, and it's just left us with the text on top of our picture. Now I can again adjust how strong I want this, and again it's a faded memory. I'm going for like this faded memory that this person's having here, so I don't want it too strong. I'm going to knock this down. I want it quite subtle, and I'm going to have it at about 44%. That looks great, really happy with that. And then finally I'm going to use my last layer, which is this tree layer, and I'm going to use this. Previously what I did was I only used parts of it, around the eye and around the lips to kind of just, I don't know, add something a little bit more interesting to the portrait. Now, what I might do this time is I might change the way I use this. I might use it as a way to frame our subject. So to get a better idea of what might look good, I'm going to just reduce the opacity of the layer to about 33%, so I can see as I move the tree layer around, and I'm using the move tool. As I move the tree layer around, I can see how it might look in different parts, depending on where I place it. I'm going to press the Command and T option here in order for me to rotate, because remember, you're not restricted to having or using your pictures in one way. You can rotate them, flip them, manipulate them in any way you wish in order to get the outcome. Now this is quite interesting, this idea of almost having the hair band morphing into the tree, and this texture wrapping around the subject in this kind of fashion. That looks quite interesting. I think I'm gonna try that. I'll just enter. I'm going to increase the opacity again, and I'm just going to find a blending mode which works quite well. Darken looks quite good. Multiply, linear, soft light. Let's go to darken. Let's just knock this opacity right down. I really want this to be quite a subtle effect. Something like that. Now I need to get rid of a lot of these areas. I really only like this area where it's working here. So I'm going to use my mask. You can get my brush again, set to black. I can make my brush bigger using the right bracket key. I'm just going to get rid of where I don't want the effect to be applied. Let's just move it from these edges. Okay, I quite like that. That's fairly minimal, but it works quite well. And what I'm going to now do is I'm going to duplicate this layer. So I've got two, and I'm going to use the move tool and move the top layer of the tree, the duplicate layer, somewhere else. Use the Control and T key. So I'm actually, I don't want that. I don't want to give her a beard. That's not going to be very flattering. Let's move it round this way and see what we can get. This is quite interesting, the way it's wrapping around her eyebrow. That branch is almost following the contour of the face. And you know, it is really about playing with your ideas and moving things around and seeing what you get. You know, sometimes you make these little accidents and they turn out well. So I like that, but I don't really like the way it's applied on this area. So I'm going to use the brush tool. I've already got a mask from the previous one because it's a copy. Make sure I'm on the mask. Yep. I'm going to get rid of the effect where I don't really want it. Let's make the brush a little bit smaller. Let's just soften it here and here. So you can see I've taken quite a lot of the mask away. I've really only left it here in this area, which I'm quite happy with. And I'm actually going to make another copy of this layer. But this time I'm going to just delete the mask. I'm going to right click on the mask of the new layer, just right click and go delete mask, so it all comes back. And then I'm going to have this, let's rotate this again. I'm going to have this maybe somewhere around the bottom corner here. Let's just make this a little bit smaller. That looks good. It's almost like these branches are coming out from this corner. We've got something in this corner, we're balancing it out with something in this corner. I'm going to use a mask again, make sure I've got the brush set to black. I'm going to get rid of the effect in certain areas. I'm just going to soften this and also knock down the opacity a little bit more. Okay, so that's my tree layers done. Now, originally I only used one tree layer here. Let's just look. Yep, tree. That was it. Just that one tree layer in the whole image. But obviously for this example, I've done it 3 times. So I've actually modified my original idea, which is fine, because you can come up with new things all the time. So I've got my portrait, I've got my beach post, my letter. Quite happy with that as it is so far. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it black and white. This is going to really allow me to visualize all the elements without being distracted by the color. The black and white layer, I'm quite happy with that at the moment. I can adjust these if I want to tweak the values, but I'm just going to leave it like that. And then I'm going to add another layer with a little bit of contrast, just using the curves here, just to give the image a little bit more punch. And that's good. I'm happy with that for now. Now, we could leave the image like that, but you know, there's still a lot we can do with it. And one of the things we're going to do is we're going to use some brushes, and not just normal brushes. We're going to use brushes which have a certain brush tip, and that creates a certain kind of effect. Now, if you right-click with your brush and then click on this arrow, we can load some brushes. Now, I have a couple of brushes here. I've got something called cloud brushes, and if I open that and we go right down to the bottom of the brushes, we get these wonderful cloud brushes. I'll just do this on a new layer, just so you can see how these brushes work. If I just click on this, you see what happens? We've actually got, let's just set this to black. We've actually got brush marks in the shape of clouds. So we're actually painting clouds, artificial clouds. Alright, so that's a custom brush. And I'm going to use a custom brush on my image. But I'm not just going to slap it on all over the place. I'm going to actually make a new layer first, which I'm going to call clouds. Because if I'm not happy with the clouds, I want to be able to change it. I want to be able to get rid of it. I don't want to just do it all over my picture and then be stuck with it. So I'm going to use some white clouds, because clouds are normally white. And I'm actually going to reduce how strong the clouds are, the opacity of the clouds. I'm just going to do a brush opacity of about 30%. And then I'm just going to click like so. Okay, and look what it's done. It's really added something special, a little bit extra to the image. We've got these nice clouds in the background. I might find another different cloud brush here. Let's find another one. And I can make the brushes bigger and smaller. And let's just add a little bit there. And that's a little bit too strong, and I don't really like that effect. So I'm actually going to change the brush to something a little, that looks better. And let's reduce the opacity down a lot more. That looks better. And then I might do another click here and there, just to add a little bit more of this cloud effect. Let's try something else. Let's change the size. It's a bit too small. Like so. So here we have our clouds, and at the moment it's at the top of the stack. I'm just going to drag this underneath the curves and the black and white, and it's just given the clouds a little bit more contrast, because now it's underneath the contrast layer. Okay. Next step is I'm going to add some more brush effects. I'm going to use another brush, which is one of these. These are like natural brushes that Photoshop comes with. The kind of grungy textured brushes, and I'm just going to make a new layer. I'm going to call this texture brushes, and I'm just going to click this here and there a few times as well. and you'll be able to see some of the texture appear. It's quite subtle. They're not massive changes here, but they're just adding extra little elements to the image, and when it's all complete and all these come together, it does make that little bit more difference to your image. Okay, so I'm good with that. I'm happy. I've got enough brushes there. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a photo filter, just to give this a little bit of color. So we're toning the image now using a warming filter. I want to go for quite a warm look here, and I can select these. I can even click on color and change this myself manually. I'll go for pink, but I don't, because I'm going for like a warm look. So I'm gonna, yeah, it looks nice. And so we've got our photo filter now. And the next step is I'm going to use a selective color. Now, selective color is fantastic in that it really allows you a lot of flexibility in adjusting the color and the feel and the mood of an image with lots of control. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the colors in the blacks, in the darkest areas, okay, in all these dark areas here. At the moment, there's not much color in there, and the tone that I've got in those areas I want to change. So I've got blacks, and now if I just move these sliders around, look what happens. We start to add and remove colors in those darkest areas, and we can really get some nice effects. So I'm going to pump in some red here. That looks nice. And I'm just going to add a little bit of magenta, and really, you know, you just move these sliders around and just find something that you like the look of. Now if I use the final one, the black one, black will make the blacks darker, or it will make them much lighter. So I want something that looks slightly faded in the blacks, maybe about -6, looks good. It's going to bring in some more of this red here. Yep, I like that. And then I'm going to go into the neutrals, and I'm going to adjust this. So now this is affecting everything outside of black, so all the light greys, all the mid-tone greys. And again, I can add a little bit of red in here. I can tweak this, add a bit of magenta, maybe throw in a bit of yellow here. Look what happens, we start to get a color shift, which is quite nice. And then I can darken or lighten those areas as well. That looks good. And then finally I'm going to go into the whites, so the highlights now, and I'm going to add an adjustment there. And this is really nice, because I'm going to add in lots of yellow, and it's just bringing those highlighted areas out. We don't want to overdo it here. Let's bring that down. I like that yellow look. I can lighten or darken the area as well. Okay, so yeah, that looks good. I'm happy with that. I'm going to close that down. And then what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do a levels here, and I'm just going to get this a little bit more punchier. Just increase the highlights, increase the midtones a little bit here and here, like so. And then just to finish this image off, I'm going to make another layer, and I'm going to use a brush. I'm going to set the brush blending mode to color dodge. I'm going to select a normal brush, nice soft brush. I'm going to pick a contrasting color. I'm going to go for something like this turquoise. It's on its own layer. I'm going to make that brush really big. And because the blending mode is set to color dodge for my brush, look what happens. It starts to tint the image without actually getting rid of the tonal information underneath, so the dark and light information. And here I'm just adding a secondary color into the image just to give it that little bit more interest, I might bring in a yellow now and just maybe knock this right down to like 5%, and then just throw in some of that as well and mix it in to warm it up in certain areas. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sharpen the entire image, and the way I'm going to do that is, the first thing, I'm going to make a copy of all of these layers together in one layer. So at the moment we've got all these layers, but I'm going to compress them all into one layer and add it right to the top of the stack. So to do that, I'm going to press Command, Alt, Shift and N and then E. Okay, so that has given us this stamped layer. So this is our stamped layer, or let's just call it final layer. And then I'm going to sharpen this, filter sharpen, I'm going to unsharp mask. I'm going to select a radius of about 1.8, and if I click on this, see before, after, just to sharpen that image up. So let's just do a quick recap. We started off with the portrait layer, which we made wider. We then added the beach posts, set the layer to hard light at 46%, and then we used our mask to get rid of the areas which was covering the face. We then added the letter, but before we added the letter we inverted it by doing Ctrl and I. We changed the blending mode to lighten at 44% and then masked out any areas we didn't want. We then added the tree to the left hand side of the face. Blending mode darken, 60%, got rid of where we didn't want it to be applied. Copied that layer, added it to the side of the head, copied it again, added it to the bottom, created a new layer, added some clouds, added a second new layer, added some of the textured brushes in these areas and these, made the image black and white, added some contrast, added a photo filter, did a selective curves adjustment, did a levels adjustment, and added the color effects using a brush set to color dodge, and we made the color selection here, and then we made a final stamped layer, and this was made using Control, Shift, Alt, N, and then we pressed down the E key, and that created a stamp. And then we went to filter, sharpen, unsharp mask, and that gave us our final image. Now I would now file save as a JPEG. I would also save the file as a PSD Photoshop file. That's the default setting. So that means I've got a JPEG version to drop into PowerPoint, but I've also got this Photoshop file with all the layers if I need to come back at any time and make any adjustments or change anything. So here we have a final image. In the next video we're going to take this final image and we're going to do some additional color developments very quickly, which we can also add to our project to show that we've thought about different alternatives and how when changing the color of the image we can also change the entire mood of the image. That's going to come up in the next video, so make sure you check that out after you've managed to get to this stage.
Combinations